my whole belief system of like what I wanted, what I thought my life was going to be, who I thought I was, everything was getting shattered. Key to happiness is not outside, you have to turn inside. That's when I really became curious about what is going on here. What is this? What is the nature of reality? Who am I? We can only seek reality or God or truth or ultimate happiness inward. Nobody could have made you go on the path. The call had to come from within. Is like that for others as well. So self-inquiry is like, it's a meditation technique in a very direct way, allows us to turn away from the appearance of the way, appearance of being a somebody and someone living a life that is so solid and real, inwards towards its source. The more we are self-conscious of like how I need to act, what I need to say, it's like almost like our authentic expression is being strangled at the neck. More worthwhile than reading or watching is discerning between the changeless self that I always am and everything else that changes. Do not take yourself to be what you perceive to come and go. All of it is a sea of change, and it's not the self.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Illuminating Dialogues number 30, where I have the pleasure of sitting down and talking to Sunny Sharma today. How are you, Sunny, and where are you coming from today?
I'm doing very well. I'm here in Sarasota, Florida. Lovely to be here with you.
Okay, thank you for coming and sitting down. And for the viewers who are not familiar with you, I'll do a short introduction.
Sure.
So, Sunny Sharma is the creator of the Self Inquiry School with over 65,000 subscribers and 5.7 million views on YouTube, helping people around the world dissolve mind identification and awaken to their true nature more deeply. Now, that might be a bit confusing for some people. What does this mind identification mean? What does true nature mean? But hopefully, we'll dive into that today. So,
Yeah.
before we begin, this dialogue is Illuminating Dialogue. It's a flow of meaning where we journey together to a place maybe we haven't gone before and hopefully illuminate ourselves and also the listeners in the process. So, with that being said, my first question to you is, what lights you up?
What lights me, like what excites me?
Mm-hmm.
Many things, in the deepest way, in regards to our conversation today, I will say truth, wisdom, you know, growing in understanding of how things really are. I would say that is what lights me up the most. That is why like I found great like fire for self-discovery on the spiritual path. But on a personal level, just simple things, just family, enjoyment, just, living a simple life, doing work that I love, enjoy, helping others. Yeah.
Oh, it's so amazing. So simple, yeah, so exciting. And I think in this day and age, especially with technology and the way, the speed the world is moving, it's special to have that.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah.
I think like finding beauty in the simple day-to-day things, it just it allows you to not live constantly for the next experience or constantly running towards pleasure and away from pain, which is a very compulsive state of living. So as I started to dive more into the spiritual path and meditation, you really observe the mind and it's just constantly seeking stimulation. And so that is a great discovery in and of itself. But yeah, it just helps you to appreciate the small things, like not always making like this moment a means to some sort of future end. Like this conversation doesn't need to bring you something or like take you somewhere. It's just like just the actual experience of speaking together and being here. Like this is the only aspect of our life that's like real right now. And so here, like just learning to experience that in its fullness, there's great beauty too. Yeah.
Mm. And as you say that, I'm just aware of myself as well. Like, where's my mind? Do I want you to like me in this podcast? Do I want to share something with the viewers? Do I want
Yeah.
the viewers to get something? And that's all happening in my mind. But like you said, we're here. So it's
Yeah.
amazing how that can happen almost and pull us out because many thoughts can be happening.
the mind has so many motives constantly. And it, like, the nature of it is very self-serving. Like, what can this do for me? How can I gain from this? Or it's always trying to relate with it in terms of gain and loss, right? Like, what do I have to gain? What can I potentially maybe lose? What do I have to protect? How can I maneuver this, manipulate this so that I can get something? So yeah, it's interesting to observe those qualities in the mind and not buy into them. So earlier you said, like, we're going to explore what does it mean to not identify with the mind. That is what it is. It's like a process of self-observation, noticing that, like, these motives, desires, resistances are arising spontaneously in the mind. I'm not doing them. I'm not making them happen. They are not necessarily me or my doing. It's
Mm.
just happening. Similarly to, like, how this sound is arising in your experience, you don't say that's my sound, it's just sound. It just happens, it appears and disappears. But thoughts, we have a great identification with. To identify means to, like, take that to be what I am and mine. And once it becomes me and mine, therefore it becomes valuable. So all of these sort of motives and compulsions are just arising in the mind. And because we are identified with the mind, it constantly keeps us restless in pursuing these motives.
Mm.
So yeah, dissolving mind identification, I would say, is like learning to outgrow this belief that I am that, and starting to experience ourselves at a more subtler level prior to the mind.
And how did you get in contact with this idea or almost experience of compulsive thinking? Because I think I watched one of your videos and you were talking about first you had this uh, maybe a back issue and then you went into the
Mhm.
Ayurveda route. So maybe you could maybe explain to the viewers because it could be helpful just to explain how a certain degree of suffering almost was needed to change your relationship to your thoughts, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how it was for you, but most people I speak to, including myself, we only came to the spiritual path and we only became curious about a deeper understanding of reality because of a great period of suffering in our lives, whether that's physical suffering, mental, emotional, financial, relationship, like something didn't go according to plan, which made us curious about something like deeper, like what is this? Who am I? So although that is not like this question, who am I, which is the integral question of self-inquiry, it didn't become immediately important for me when I just entered the spiritual path. But yeah, my physical, like my back injury, which was like, it really was like an extended period of suffering in my life for about 6 to 7 years. During that time, like my whole belief system of like what I wanted, what I thought my life was going to be, who I thought I was, everything was getting shattered, right? Because it's like when you experience such great pain and limitation for a number of years, especially at a really young age, like, yeah, you just don't know where to go from that. So that's when the teachings started to come into my life a little bit. Also, like an Ayurveda teacher came into my experience. At that point, it was all about healing, right? I didn't care about growing spiritually. I didn't even know what that meant. It was just about, I want to heal. And I was so desperate that I was willing to do anything, which is why I was like willing to start to follow the beginner, uh, like spiritual teachings, maybe look at my situation a little more differently. I started to realize how, like, yeah, my situation may be limited, but I'm also looking at it through a very, very limited lens, through a lot of resistance, fear, denial. So, that teacher that came into my life at that time taught me meditation, like very beginner, just focusing on breath, um, a little bit of like Ayurveda techniques and all that stuff. So I started undergoing Ayurveda treatment. And when I started to experience great difference in how I was feeling, because at that time I was taking like painkillers every single day because there was no other option. And I remember still I would have to take the pain medicine every day. But just like from a few days of Ayurvedic treatment and like exploring these new beginner teachings, just from like 10 days of it, I remember it was like for the next 6 months, I didn't have to even touch any pain medicine. So this really made me curious about like,
Mm.
hey, there's like something here. Like I come from such a great Indian tradition of like all these spiritual traditions, but I never cared about it because yeah, I was never interested. And I never understood it. But now I was like, okay, a little curious. So in the beginning, it was just all about healing. As I started to feel a little better, I started to get into the empowerment teachings, like law of
Mm.
attraction and creating the life you want to live. So yeah, as I started to get a little bit more into that, that is where I started to become really, really spiritually interested. But it was all about like what I can make happen in my life. I had nothing and now I want everything. I felt like a victim and now I want to become an empowered individual. I want to conquer the world. That's like sort of the energy. I
Mm.
want to create the life I desire. Um, so a little, like maybe a year or two on that, focused in those teachings, I started to see that, hey, I thought that like, so when I was like, I felt like a victim and life wasn't going my way, I thought that I was unhappy because life wasn't going my way. And that when I started to experience all the things I desired, I would feel happy and fulfilled and no longer feeling unworthy, fearful, restless. But I started to see that that wasn't the case, you know? I got a little taste of success and a little bit of achievement. But then I started to notice that like the experience that I've always desired, even when I'm experiencing them, my mind is still just always looking towards the future. It's still restless. It's still afraid of what is going to lose. It still doesn't feel fulfilled. I still don't feel worthy. So there's still a hole, that I'm trying to fill, that the mind now claims that, hey, if I get more of this or if I get something else, then this hole will be filled. But I was like, maybe that's also not the case. And that's when like the teachings of like during that
Mm.
phase when I was going through that reflection, that's when the teachings of Ramana Maharshi came into my experience. And for the first time, it was like, turn within. That there's that the key to happiness is not outside. It is you have to turn inside. So that's when I really became curious about, okay, what is going on here? What is this? What is the nature of reality? Who am I?
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we can get so easily stuck inside, and I know I'm still on this journey. And I was at university and I picked up this book on the shelf. I think it was like How to Win Friends and Influence People. And I
Mhm.
typed into Google how to become a better person. Stoicism came up. So it was all about how to go to the gym, how to build my body. So there was a certain part of me I was trying to enhance. Um, and now it almost feels like that part that's trying to enhance itself is almost not me.
Yeah.
Um, so, like you said, it's sort of like a reverse, but kind of have to get to that point
Yeah, totally.
to realize that that's not it,
Yeah.
which is so strange. So,
Mhm.
I'm wondering how you saw the difference between the self empowerment almost and then that self inquiry. Is that self empowerment, that outwards, still needed? Or does self inquiry, when you get to a certain stage, does it then also help you with outward expression as well?
Yeah, well, that was a great discovery, right? Because in when we encountered these two teachings, especially when we're in that phase between the two teachings, we feel like they are at conflict with one another and that you could either do one or the other. One thing is, I found that through the self inquiry meditation, as we start to outgrow identification with the mind and the body, outgrow identification with the self image, which is just our idea of who I am today. But like, even our idea of who I am today is very different from the idea that I used to have about myself. So even that idea is not essentially what I am, is just an idea. It's an image, a personality, which changes also. So as we start to outgrow even the self-image and start to like understand our changeless nature, our true nature, it causes massive shifts in the mind and the body and the personality, in how we think, speak, feel, act. So through self-inquiry, I found, although I was not focused in creating many personal changes, a lot of personal changes happen on their own, because like how we act and what we think and what we desire, it's all a result of our, it's all rooted in our understanding of life. And as our deeper understanding of life and deeper understanding of self changes, naturally what we desire, what we, how we act, how we speak, what we talk about, what we think about also changes, you know? It's like the surface of the ocean. Like a little shift in the bottom of the ocean creates ripples on the surface. So yeah, that's how I found. Yeah, like, so on the personal level, of course, it's a journey of change and growth. So it will always flow towards that. And that's okay too. It's, there's nothing wrong with trying to be a better person, trying to better and improve your life and want a life of well-being. But it cannot be like our addiction, you know, because if
Mm.
we keep believing that the answer to my sadness or my unfulfillment is out there and that I can perfect this experience somehow so that I will feel that, so that I will feel whole and complete, then we will keep just, you know, running around chasing experiences. This cannot be perfected. Like, not only look at your life, but look at anybody's life. Like, even the most successful people, like, personal life is imperfectly perfect, but it is like imperfect. You cannot perfect everything in your life.
Mm.
And I feel that the imperfection of experience only exists so that we eventually come to the recognition that we need to turn inwards. We
Mm.
can only seek reality or God or truth or ultimate happiness inward, away from form, because form is impermanent. So to find the changeless, find the true, we must turn our gaze away from form, inward towards the formless.
Mm. And what is that? What is that kind of? So there's noise and there's attachments outside. Maybe people, or maybe your identifications with people or forms. But what is that calling almost that draws a person, that starts to draw a person inside into that way? Because I currently work in corporate as well as doing this work. I work as an engineer, and the worlds are totally different. One
Yeah.
is more of the attachment to the outer world, and when you're communicating with people, and then when I'm doing the podcasts, it's more in that internal world. So, what is that almost voice? It's not the mind. What is it that starts to lead somebody inwards?
You can call it, I don't know, like a pull from God. You can like a calling towards truth. Um, yeah, like who knows what to call it, but we know that it comes, and we know that we cannot make it come for somebody else. You know, because a lot of times people ask the question, how do I introduce the spiritual path to my loved ones or
Mm.
my friends and family? How do I make my parents or my children or my spouse understand this? But you know that like nobody could have made you go on the path. The call had to come from within, and is like that for others as well. So of course we can be a guiding light to those who wish to understand and those who maybe have heard that call, but it's very difficult to make that call come from someone. Ultimately, it is that reality or truth or God or self which makes the call. And we, like, our answer to that call is spiritual path, spiritual practice. So yeah, I don't know what that call is, but yeah, it's just an inclination towards truth.
Yeah, it's really beautiful. Um, I'm just wondering, what's the purpose of the ego in the first place? What's the purpose of the compulsive thinking that is, within every human almost?
I mean, I wouldn't say like uh purpose, right? Because the idea of purpose is also rooted in personal identity. So if I believe myself to be a purpose, I mean, if I believe myself to be a person living this life, and I'm in this world, now comes, and I'm going through all these experiences. Now comes the notion of what is the purpose of all of this. But purpose itself is a very personal idea, you know. If we are to just put some words to it, I would say like the purpose of ego, or just a sense of being an individual person, is for the sake of communication, is for the sake of in the experience of interaction, the
Hmm.
experience of relationship, the experience of multiplicity and diversity and differences where there is none. So like, for that one reality to be divided into the many, to appear to be divided into the many, because it's never actually divided. Division and multiplicity is all an appearance, so to appear to be the many, it takes on many forms.
Hmm.
And then we can have a conversation. Then we can have it, life as we know it. Then that appearance can appear to be.
Hmm.
So I would say maybe that's the purpose of it. But yeah, like that whole notion is also just a very, very like personal centered.
Hmm.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, no, it's like as you're explaining it, just like analogy of like a wave, like a play, where like
Yeah.
we're remembering we're part of this multiplicity, and then yeah, we fall back in and then forget. So yeah, I don't know. That came to my mind, but you were
I
going to
like the
say
example of the wave,
yeah,
because
wave.
like let's say the wave arises on the surface of the ocean.
Hmm.
It has like momentary existence, right? And even when the wave appears, it is still only the ocean. Like the wave is just an apparent form which appears in the ocean, but it's like it's still only ever ocean. There's no really such thing as a wave, it's just always ocean.
Hmm.
But let's say now the wave, when it arises, it's like, what is the purpose of the wave? There's no purpose. It's just always the ocean. So yeah, that's what I meant, that it's like it's rooted in personal identity. Only when like only the person which believes itself to be like a separate individual that has existence, it says, "Hey, what's the purpose of my existence?" But all the while, it was like the wave in the ocean.
Hmm.
So self-inquiry is like it's a meditation technique that, in a very direct way, allows us to turn away from the appearance of the wave, appearance of being a somebody and someone living a life that is so solid and real, inwards towards its source. So it's a way of discerning between what I truly am versus what I appear to be. It's a discernment between the changeless self that I am versus all transient phenomena, all transient experiences. And the body and mind and the self image are one of those experiences that are always transient. So that's why self inquiry intrigued me so much during that time that I told you about. Is because it's a very small book, Who Am I? Distills the teaching of Ramana Maharshi very, very beautifully in just a few statements. In that, Ramana Maharshi says, like, there's something within you that has never changed. You experience it as I. Like let's say when Jhoty was 10 years old, running around in a park, the body was completely different. The content of the mind was completely different. Even the idea of who you were was very different.
Hmm.
The whole world you were experiencing was very different. But that whole experience you experienced through this sense I. The I was never different.
Hmm.
I is always I. It's always continuous. Even when now you are experiencing this moment, I don't know your exact age, but like the content of your thoughts is completely different.
Hmm.
Your self-image is completely different. Your body is completely different. The world you're experiencing is completely different. So like literally everything in your experience has changed, yet I is I. Now is now. This is like the hint of truth inside of illusion.
Hmm.
I, now, there's this feeling of being alive. There's a sense of beingness, realness, presence, selfness that never changes. It is the changeless reality accompanying all transient experience. So Ramana Maharshi says, find out what that is, right? Like, and to do so, you have to really like sort of, in a way, bring your attention to that. It requires us to bring attention away from our sense perceptions, our thoughts, feelings, sensations, into this presence, beingness, nowness. Yeah. So let's carry on from here. But I hope that made sense.
Sure, yeah, I was enjoying that. And what came to mind is that analogy of like the horses, the five horses, and I don't know if people listen to this will know, but like the horses are running everywhere, which it indicates the five senses, or
Mm.
and the charioteer pulls the horses together almost. So we take the five senses inwards, um, and meditate. But often what I found, and shout out to my client Steve, he actually introduced me to you. He was doing your course. Um,
Who?
Steve, his name is.
Oh, okay,
So shout
Steve.
out,
Oh,
yeah.
very cool. Oh, okay. Yeah. And I know Steve was exploring the teachings of Sikhism a lot too.
Yeah, okay, cool. That's what we've
Beautiful.
been doing.
I'll thank him for the introduction.
Awesome. So yeah, we're talking about like the thoughts, and then how the thoughts actually, when we are talking right now, it can be a lot of, let's say, intellectual understanding, but then actually to integrate that intellectual understanding, so we're not just like, okay, oneness and
Yeah.
nothing matters, but actually that that beingness, that integration of the beingness there. And often I find that when I started to read Eckhart Tolle and things like that, I got a lot of wisdom from that, but I felt very detached from the world. Then there was then a phase of like almost like not caring almost, and then reintegrating again. So I'm wondering as well if you find that a process, and yeah, is that a process that you find intellectualizing all this spiritual understanding versus integrating it?
Yeah. It's very natural to go through a phase like that. But like it's important to be patient through all phases because all phases also come and go.
Hmm.
So I also encountered a phase where I became, because when you start to encounter, oh, like all transient experience is illusory, it's unreal, it's not the essence, the mind will create some trouble. And it will either like start to think things are meaningless, or it will start to become disinterested in personal things. And so it's important that when you go through that type of phase, especially initially, that you don't allow the mind to make such a big deal out of it. It is a phase and it will go. On this journey, we discover many things. The discovery happens, and then the mind reacts to that discovery. And it will try to claim it. It will try to create a problem out of it, or it will try to put it on a pedestal. And then, so it's important to not give in to that too much. So even if you go through a phase of meaninglessness, let it be so. The phase will pass. Even if you go through a phase of like hey, everything, you're like super detached, and it's just a phase that will pass. I experienced these types of phases too, and so now whenever I go through a phase and the mind tries to like make a big deal out of it, I just sort of remember, it's not how it always will be, and it's not necessarily how things are. It's just how the mind is currently. This is a lens through which the mind is looking at it right now. So let me not really fully buy into it or create a problem out of it.
Hmm.
So yeah, I feel that those phases come and go. But this is why in my work, I really, really emphasize to people to have a disciplined meditation practice. No matter how much of a beginner you are or how much you think you have advanced and grown in this understanding, be completely humble. Every single day, you create a period in your day where you sit down and you put aside this whole mask of being a person, in your in that period, like you have to look at it as like your period of total devotion to God or truth or self. And in that moment, you become empty of me and my life, become empty of what's going to happen to me later, tomorrow, my responsibilities, my family, my this, my that, become empty of all of that and turn inward. Like, so that allows us to not get so entangled in the mental resistances and, mind always making some trouble. So it allows us to stay free, smooth. And that period of meditation every single day, like abiding in silence, allows us to be in the world and do everything, but not identify with the world and get totally lost in the personal costume. It allows us to spontaneously keep growing in wisdom throughout all the phases of life, and even keep our spiritual path simple. Otherwise, the spiritual path itself becomes a cause for suffering. Oh, I have to do this, I have to do that. I'm not growing, like. So I feel that the meditation practice daily, every single day, disciplined, almost like looking at it like my daily ritual of like devotion. It simplifies so many things and it naturally allows the integration process to happen. It even brings this self-remembrance, this being present quality to the rest of our day, when we work, when we speak to each other, when we relax, when we're with family. So yeah, I think the sit down meditation practice super important for natural spontaneous integration.
Hey everybody, sorry to interrupt your podcast, but if I could please ask you to take the time to like and subscribe to this channel. It would help us as we try to grow this channel and share our guests' deep wisdom with you and the rest of the world. What lights you up? Why do I ask this? Because I want to create a space for you to go slow to go far and offer a space of one-to-one coaching, and I'll put some testimonials up here. This will allow you to access all of the wisdom for our illuminating dialogues, actually integrate and implement this wisdom in your daily life for whatever means you'd like to transform, live in alignment, live in purpose, and of course live in your dharma. If that resonates with you, you can book a session directly with me on Jhoty.com. If you would like to join the free community, you can also go to Jhoty.com. All the links are in the description, and connect with like-minded people, where we also have a chat about the next Illuminating Dialogue podcast episodes. So thank you again, everybody, for supporting this podcast. I really do appreciate it, and I hope you enjoy the rest of this podcast. Yeah, it's something I do myself, and just watching the thoughts and emotions. But often when people are coming in, especially if they have a Western lens and their mind's very curious about all the different paths, like the gurus, there's Bhakti Yoga, there's Dhyana Yoga, there's Raja Yoga. Then they might see like your videos, they might see someone else's videos, and they get kind of confused on YouTube, let's say. How would you simplify all of these different types of yogas and different paths, and how can that being or person almost like find its resonance?
So that's a very important word you just used, resonance. The teaching that is relevant for you at this current time is the teaching that resonates with you. And the teaching that resonates with you, like, is coming to your experience. It's important to see that, like, I don't find the teaching finds me. It's flowing into my experience from somewhere, God knows where, but like somehow, somewhere, it is flowing in. There are always some teachings you may not resonate with, right? Discard them. Don't involve yourself in them. Like, it's always been my rule to keep my path very, very simple and just practice what I deeply resonate with, whatever really calls to me. So, of course, like, the main focus of my work is self-inquiry meditation, which you can call the path of wisdom or meditation. But I have felt a calling towards different paths at different phases of my journey too, like when I was growing greatly through this path of self-inquiry, there there was a feeling that, hey, um, I can go deeper. I can do something to keep going deeper into this path, and I've got this. But then I started to hit a wall in my meditation, and I started to feel like a staleness, um, an obstacle where I felt like I was stuck and couldn't go deeper. That's where the path of devotion
Mm.
came into my life. I read the teachings of Bhagavad Gita, and that completely like brought a whole new element of the spiritual path into my my experience. And that's what was necessary at that time, and that's what started to deeply resonate. It was like all about devotion, service, um, yeah, and that's what I felt that was needed to like soften my ego, to make me aware that I can't do anything to go deeper anymore. That it's about me opening myself up and letting go of the idea of who I am and what I can, go deeper as, and just let grace flow, right? Like that's where like because devotion destroys pride, the
Mm.
idea that I am a so and so, and at that point that was needed. So I always just invite everybody to follow your own resonance. Let's say someone is watching this and they totally don't resonate with these teachings of that we're talking about today. It's like just don't even bother, you know. Focus only on what calls to you, because that is always your current step, and that will reveal to you naturally your next step.
Mm. That's so beautiful. I know that kirtan, like devotional singing, really resonates because
Yeah.
obviously coming from the Sikh lineage, really
Yes.
resonates. And like you said, it churns that and makes it softer. But even in meditation, or we're of sometimes trying to seek something and trying to ask for something, but you use the word grace,
Yeah.
and that judgment can even come to ourselves in meditation to try to get somewhere. But then you just become helpless because it's weird because you have to do something, but you can't do anything. So, um, yeah, I think that resonance is really important. But
I started to notice that too in my meditation
yeah,
practice, that like let's say I'm in like deep meditation, but that same unfulfilled mind from,
hmm,
that same unfulfilled mind that says, hey, I want this experience and that experience. I want this new fancy object. I want that fancy object. When it comes on the spiritual path, now it says, I want to go deeper in meditation. I
yes,
want to experience this. So it's like, I remember in deep meditation, I noticed my mind craving, or it's
hmm,
like waiting. It's like, what's going to happen now? I'm in deep meditation. So it's like that also is just a mental reaction arising spontaneously. It is not me. It is not mine. It is also being seen to arise, and it also passes. So that was where it was a great discovery at that time in my practice. Like, hey, even this, I don't need to buy into or believe in or pursue. It's not about what happens right now in deep meditation. The mind only knows how to search experiences, but our true nature is not an experience that can come and go. So it's like I let even that go. And so it's like surrendering even that.
hmm,
If we buy into that, we become personal. We once again step into pride. And now I'm looking in the future for something.
yeah,
But the moment I surrender that, I rest as the impersonal, as the true now, with no notion of what's to come or what I will get from this.
hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
even in the spiritual process, like, okay, you do breath work and then you get rid of the emotions and you can go deeper into meditation. But then, like you said, that
Yeah.
craving, it's still trying to plan something to go deeper.
Yeah.
Um, and so, is that spiritual ego, or how would you talk about what is spiritual ego?
Yeah, I guess you can say spiritual ego. I mean, I don't think it's that important that we define it in any
Mm,
way, but it's just that like the mind takes on the identity of now a spiritual person that has this knowledge, you know, has these amount of concepts about the truth or about who I am. But that's also all just thought. It's also all just concept, unreal, you know? Whereas real spirituality is now, it's outside of concept, you know? So, yeah, I guess like that's the term spiritual ego. It is just the mind which claims ownership of of the discoveries that are actually being bestowed to you, that are flowing into your experience, but it claims to have earned them, to have done something to attained or achieved them. And now it is the wise person. But notice that that wise person is also just your current idea of yourself. Previously, you were, let's say, the worldly engineer, that wanted this and that, and maybe worldly successful. Like that was your idea of yourself. And now the spiritual path has opened up to you, and then you start having these discoveries and becoming wiser and clearer. But now the mind creates a new image of itself. I'm the YouTuber, and I share these teachings, and I'm wise, and I'm better than others. And it's everybody's mind. So it's not like we should feel guilty for these things. It's like you actually observe how selfish the mind is and how full of itself it is. If our mind was like a friend, like constantly self-centered, talking about itself, about its life, always taking ownership and doership of things it did not even do, we would not be friends with such a person. But like that is the nature of our mind. It's
Mm.
very self-centered, selfish. That's why so many of these teachings, and even, I've explored a little bit of Sikh teachings too. Um, it's all about like I think there's also like a term like the five mental poisons or something like that.
Yeah, like thieves. Yeah,
Yes,
five
yes.
thieves. Yeah.
So it's like all personal centered, ego centered behavior,
Mm.
selfishness. So we observe those qualities in the mind, and by the very virtue of observing them, we outgrow identification with them. We see that I am not that, and that I do not have to buy into that. I don't have to believe in that. I don't have to pursue that and bring that into life, bring that into action.
Mm.
Yeah.
And who is the observer that is observing all of this?
That's the primary question of life, right? Who am I? Who am I that observes all these passing experiences? So that is the main question of self-inquiry. I would say the main question of all of life, like that, the main question of all spirituality. What is self, or what am I? What is aware of experience? Because as I was sharing with you earlier, as Ramana Maharshi invites us to see, it's like everything you call life is a changeful experience. Like right now, this experience is appearing, and it appears to be so real and true. But soon you're going to look back at this experience in a similar way that you look at the dream that you had last night. It won't exist. This experience will be completely gone. The dream you had last night, when it was appearing, it appeared very real and
Mm.
true. That whole world came into existence, and it felt like reality. But then the moment it disappears, it's no longer, it never existed. It just appeared to have existed. So all life, all experiences, Ramana Maharshi asks us to see our waking experience just like our dream experience, that this is also all just a passing show, which it appears. While it's appearing, it feels so real and true and solid, but it disappears. It is strung together along with memory to give it a sense of continuity and make personal life as we know it possible. But to even think of the experience you had, even that is a thought arising in the current experience, which also passes. So it's just a train of transient experiences. But there's something which knows the coming and going of all these experiences, which is not coming and going. And again, this you feel in every moment as now. It is what we call this moment. Notice how this moment never changes. In this moment, all experiences come and go, appear and disappear. So it's time that I stop defining myself to be the body, to be the mind, to be any changing experience, and start to be as I really am, to abide as myself. To abide as myself, I need to only just step out of thought and simply be without associating myself with anything which comes and goes. That is the essence of meditation. So that's where we start to grow in the understanding a little bit of the nature of this observer, and that it doesn't have a face, it doesn't have a name, it doesn't have a story, it doesn't have a motive. It is pure, conceptless, wordless, imageless, judgmentless, descriptionless, definitionless awareness.
Wow. And the
Yeah.
time, the concept of time, it changes completely. Like you're saying, experiences come in and then they go out, and yeah, just like your whole reality just changes because the
It's a whole
concept of
paradigm
time.
shift.
Yeah, it's a
Time applies to only experiences which come and go,
yeah,
not to myself.
yeah,
Now, I am now.
yeah.
Now is the end of time. Again, time only applies to objects which come and go. It applies to thoughts, feelings, sensations, sense perceptions, not to the timeless beingness, which is my real body.
And it's really a sense of fearlessness because you're not attached to anything. You're not attached to any plans. You're not attached to any feelings, any emotions. And yeah, what arises out of you? How can people be more familiar with what is arising out of them and following that?
What do you mean arising out of them?
So let's say you had an impulse. Let's say something easy, coffee or tea.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have to make that decision, right? Or maybe it's a decision where you want to travel to or something. When something needs to be done, what is that arises out of you that then makes that decision or does that, in a non-attached way?
In a simple way,
Mm-hmm.
I look at it like this: the mind decides, the body acts. I am not the mind, I am not the body. So notice how we like, okay, I am not that. But then what do I do when I have to make a decision? So notice again, once again, we define ourselves
Yeah.
as a person that has to decide and do. But the teaching is not saying that. It's saying that you are not the person that has an impulse, that thinks what to decide and then does. That happens. That is like the wave appearing on the ocean. So the experience of you getting an impulse for coffee and then the mind deciding and then the body going to go get it, that's all an experience appearing in your seeing. You are not the mind which decides. You are not the body which acts. You are not the whole experience, anything inside the experience. You are only the witness. So in this way, we can start to discern. On the surface level, you do whatever needs to be done will be done. Like right now, words are flowing, body movements are happening, like experience is just happening. It happens effortlessly, spontaneously. Even when we feel like I am doing it, that's only the illusion of control, but experience is always just spontaneously happening. That's why you can see that like sometimes you actually go in with your own plans about the situation, about what's going to happen, and ends up being totally different than what you had planned. Experience is spontaneous. Mind only has a illusion of control.
Mm.
So experience still happens. Like on the surface, the person you appear to be, like Jyoti, will have his preferences, his past, his story, his interests, his work, his relationships. That's the surface level appear. That's like the movie appearing on the screen. You are not the images appearing. You are the screen.
Mm.
The screen is always there as it is, no matter what images are appearing on it, whether the experience of the body meditating is appearing or the experience of the body at work. You know, the point of like the our practice helps us to discover ourselves as the changeless beingness, awareness in which all experiences are appearing. I'm not only that in meditation, I am that here and now. I can continue to appear to be the person. There's nothing wrong with that. I embrace my personal nature, but I'm not the person. This I must know. Otherwise, all my behavior will become one very, very, very self-centered just for the sake of my gain. So and that's the cause of suffering. That's what the Buddha taught us. In Buddhism, sorry, like there's one more thing. In Buddhism, like one of the main teachings is observe the three characteristics of experience. One, all experience is transient. Constantly observe this. Two, there's no self in experience. No thought, no sensation, no feeling, no sense perception. And that's literally the entirety of our experience. What we see, hear, taste, touch, smell, think, and body sensation. None of it is self. It's all changing phenomena, and none of it can be said to be the self because the self is that which observes. It's coming and going. So we observe that everything is impermanent. We recognize that nothing has self in it. No thought, nothing is self. And the third is to see that it's a sea of suffering. If I identify myself with anything inside of experience, there's suffering. So if the extent of my self-knowledge is I'm a person, there will be endless suffering, no matter what you achieve, no matter what you do, no matter what experience you have. Because the person is a fragmented state. It itself is a changeful state. It can never be complete. It can never be whole. It can never really be happy. So yeah, that's like, it's not only self-inquiry, spiritual path is not only the way to grow spiritually, it is also, it solves the question of our personal happiness as well.
And when you're doing your teachings, do you speak to that person with the personhood, or are you speaking to, or do you switch between the two? Because I think that's also quite interesting, because obviously if a person hasn't touched that depth, then perhaps talking to them as an individual person could be more resonant, if that makes sense.
Yeah. It's not something that we decide, the more I grow in this understanding, the more I see that I'm like a mirror for whoever I meet. So the more empty I am, I'm able to reflect what you like your mind, like what you need as purely as I possibly can. If I'm now very invested in myself and my motives, then the mirror becomes a little dirty, and then the experience won't be as pure and will have less connectiveness. But like we are all each other's mirror, and in that way, like we like how I speak and behave today is very much influenced by you as it is like by me. So yeah, I find that the more I do this work, like in our school, because I run a school right now. It's called Self Inquiry School, as you said earlier, and because this process is so abstract, my goal with the school was like to make it as simple and practical as possible, to give people a structure to follow and deepen their practice and grow in this, right? So I see that people of all levels of understanding may join our school. And so I try my best to just get out of the way in all interactions. I used to, just when I just started doing this work because I was new, I was like, I really want to help this person and I hope that I can say the right thing at the right time. But I noticed that the more I would do that, the more constricted, restricted, inauthentic my expression becomes. So it's like now it's more so just about trusting that, hey, this person has come to the school due to a call from within. Um, and if it is relevant from, I mean, if it's like what is meant to be that they benefit from this or they benefit from this interaction or whatever, then it will be so. It's not my job. It's now God's responsibility itself. Like I'm just going to just just be and let what needs to happen in every interaction happen. Take a similar approach. I take a similar approach in these types of like, interviews or let's say what, even just simple conversations with my wife or my parents, just see that experiences spontaneously happening. Whatever that experience needs to be for both people, that will happen. And I find through this, it's like you get out of the way and you become like the instrument of the self of God. And then whatever that person needs to hear in that moment, whether your mind then comes in and says this was good or bad, that's it happens. So
Wow.
I've walked away from meetings that I do like because let's say I do like Q&As or meditation meetings. I've walked away from some meetings that my mind says, hey, this wasn't that good of a meeting. I wish I, did better. But then someone that same day reached out to me and was like, oh my God, thank you so much. This is what I needed to hear. So it's like, how can we know what experience needs to be in every moment? The mind just judges, but you start to discover that, like, hey, experience is always as it needs to be.
Mm.
Just let it be. Let it be as it needs to be. Yeah.
Yeah, because often we can try to like tailor things to this or that, but I like that thing of you were saying just a mirror because it's almost like consciousness does that itself, and it's like
Yeah.
it resonates with that person who needs whatever shift or
Exactly.
it's amazing. Um, cool. And even like you were saying, even with this podcast, I notice if I'm trying too hard to structure in a certain way,
Yeah.
that's also so social interactions and everything like that. If we just let it flow, then you know almost it's very organic. Don't
Yeah,
panic.
exactly. There is a feeling of authenticity,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I used to be so in my head
Mm,
back in the day when I was like growing up.
mm,
In my all my childhood, I was deeply insecure. I was very afraid of like one-to-one interaction. I was very fearful of people, So it's like that also carried into my like high school years and everything. I was just very awkward and like almost like social anxiety, right? Um, and so this has been a really good learning process for me. The more we are so self-conscious of like how I need to act, what I need to say, it's like almost like our authentic expression is being strangled at the neck.
yeah.
But then the more you just like sort of try like, and that doesn't happen overnight. It's like a gradual process of like meditation and self-observation. I feel that now I'm getting better and better at just like learning to relax and then just letting the personal expression dance,
Mm,
whether that is perceived as like good or bad. And I find that the more we do that, it's like our authentic expression has a certain purity that resonates with others as well. So it's like I now just try to relax without too much like no planning, no like
yeah,
because notice like we're not even thinking of what to say, but
yeah.
words are just happening. There's the illusion that I'm planning and what to say and I'm saying that and I'm choosing what to say, but speech is just happening. So it's beautiful to just let your authentic expression run loose.
Wow. Yeah, like this power of authenticity. Like often, I had a lot of social anxiety as well. Like growing up in
Mhm.
like a university too, and like when I'm starting to like meditate and stuff, it's almost like, okay, then if I'm spiritual, then I should be quiet and I should be humble. But then again, that's another subtle thing. And it's like, can I be emotional? Well, what is emotions, And just allowing that to come through. And, I dance as well, right? And dancing itself is a form of art or
Yeah.
expression, Bhangra. And
Oh, beautiful.
yeah,
Yes.
and I feel like that also has its same properties, like you were saying. Yeah, it's just really beautiful.
Yeah, like I think I mean I'm not good at dance, but I have felt that let's say at weddings or my own wedding, and we did some dance routines and stuff and also just on the dance floor like dance is also most pure when it's least self-conscious. When it's least like I mean you can have a planned dance routine, But even that planned dance routine has a certain spontaneity to it
Yeah.
that is free from personal self-consciousness, you know? It's just like totally being there in that moment. And it's such great enjoyment. And also on the outside, it looks really good. Like it actually looks like, wow.
Yeah.
So I know I can't say I try to bring that quality into my conversations because any trying is actually only restricting. But you know what I mean? It's just then that I feel is like the greatest cure to all social anxiety, all just the suffering that is created through the mind trying to control every little thing in our lives. We can allow this spontaneity, this dance of our personal expression in all areas of our life. And we can train ourselves to do that. We can take a leap of faith more and more until we become more and more grounded in that. It's a much simpler and more beautiful way to live than like let's say the compared to our previous ways.
Yeah, so, and as you were saying, grounding, I'm just noticing like as I started going that path, started to looking at masculine, feminine, all the chakras and all these different techniques, which, you can access, but then again, it gets very confusing and sometimes ungrounded,
Yeah.
and then you get lost in that. So, um, I guess as we slowly wrap up, your advice to people as they're exploring more metaphysical things, again, um, your advice to people on their usefulness, and how to carry that information, but again, um, with that path of realizing who we are.
So the path of realizing who we are requires you to carry no information. In fact, unlearn all the information, but just not caring about it, right? Like nothing, no learned statement or teaching can really is of much value. You know, all spiritual teachings are of as much value as they are in their power to turn you inwards towards self-awareness, awareness of being. And in that awareness of being, there are no concepts. There's nothing about chakras. There's nothing about any scripture, right? All scriptures only point to this, to the God within, to the self within. So my advice is always to keep if this advice resonates, you know, because like for some people it may not resonate, and I'm okay with that because then what is relevant for them will be something else. But to anybody who is maybe resonating with this talk or interested in self inquiry or just the quest for self knowledge, right? Self realization, I would say to keep your path as simple as possible. Only like 20% of our path needs to be conceptual learning, let's
Mm.
say reading or watching videos and discussions. That's a great part of the path, right? One, it's entertaining because we are really interested in it. Two, it helps our expand our mind into like a new reality we did not know. Makes us more curious. It keeps us more motivated, right? I do like a daily reading every day with my coffee in the morning. And I try to learn something like, read something about the spiritual path every day. But truly, it has to be a minor portion of our path. The rest is practice. So, what does the practice look like? We have to have a daily meditation practice. That is the foundation. It will just keep our practice, whole spiritual path simple. It will keep us from suffering personal life. It will give us the clarity on how to navigate personal life without getting lost in the world, getting too attached to the world. It will keep our spiritual path going deeper, right? So foundational meditation practice where we sit every single day, you know, let's say twice for 20 to 30 minutes each. And then the rest is this discernment. More worthwhile than reading or watching is discerning between the changeless self that I always am
Mm.
and everything else that changes. And the main rule of self inquiry is do not take yourself to be what you perceive to come and go, whether that's a outside experience of the world or whether that's the most intimate experience of personality, preference, desire. All of it is a sea of change and it's not the self. So, in that discernment, there's also no learned knowledge. It is very here and now. That's why it's called a direct path. You know, self-inquiry is often referred to as a direct path method because it is always about here and now. It's not about believing something. It's not about holding on to any learned knowledge. It's actually about being empty here and now and discerning between myself and all things which come and go. And just in other words, being myself.
Mm.
There's main teaching on the main book on the teachings of Ramana Maharshi. It's titled "Be as You Are." That I would say is the essence of meditation. Being, and I already am. I need not make an effort to be, just being, but not associating my being with anything that is appearing right now. Thoughts, ideas, sense perception, right? So being myself. So that in essence, I would say is the path. And it's a way to keep things simple. Because even today, after exploring this path for so many years, sometimes if I get too into conceptual things, I myself get lost and I get confused. And I just like, let it go. But I find that the more I just abide in my silent beingness, things become clearer. Things I did not previously understand, teachings I did not previously understand, now I start to understand and
Mm.
experience. So that's my message to anybody who's really serious about this path.
Amazing. And yeah, when I feel like my head is going a lot, sometimes just even placing my hand on my heart or chest, it just helps me just at least calm the mind and just come back into
Yeah.
some sort of awareness. And I think my final question is, does this path ever stop? This
I mean,
self-inquiry?
I have not encountered a stop yet. I'm very much on the path and I have not come towards any final realization. So I can't answer that question. Perhaps you're better to ask somebody else. But yeah, I don't know. And I don't want to create any assumption.
Yeah.
Because yeah, we read in a lot of these scriptures and teachings that there is a like moment of enlightenment or realization. So I don't know exactly what that is, right? Because that is the funny thing about pursuing truth,
Hmm.
pursuing God, pursuing self. At one level, you're like, I don't even know what I'm pursuing
Yeah.
because it is totally unknown. Because anything that is known is a transient experience which comes and goes, and therefore it cannot be that. So, in a way, what we are seeking is not an experience that will happen in time. Therefore, it cannot have a beginning and end. You don't know what you are pursuing. And in a way, you are what you are pursuing because you are the changeless. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know how this will develop. All I can say is that like, this is how it's appearing right now. And I love it. And I'm that's what I like sharing and talking about. So I'll continue to do so until it no longer feels relevant.
Beautiful. What a place to wrap up. Thank you so much for today, for sharing your wisdom, for sharing, yeah, all of just what flowed through you, to everyone who's listening today. If people want to connect to the school, to your YouTube videos, where can they reach out and find you?
Yeah, thank you. It was a pleasure. I really enjoyed talking with you. It was an amazing podcast. And thank you for reaching out. So anybody can find me on YouTube, youtube.com/self-inquiry school or just self-inquiryschool.com.
Nice and simple. And I'll put that in the description below if people want to go and connect and check it out. Cool. Thank you so much again for your time, Sunny.
Thank you, Jhoty. It was great.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for watching as well.